Welcome to everyone who's joined us for this, the first of a series of webinars. We don't know how long the series is going to be, but we thought that this conference was a great way of starting off this webinar series on exploring social pedagogy concepts during turbulent times. Obviously, we still are living in turbulent times. And as you possibly know, I think there's something really important about social pedagogy, theory, practice. That relation between theory and practice needs to be very vibrant. It needs to be really alive. And therefore, it is really important that what happens in practice informs theory development, but also to explore what can theory offer us when we are in practice, especially at times where we will have 100,000 different things on our minds and lots of worries. So that's why we thought it might be quite pertinent to start this webinar series. We have a few slides prepared, and we have done that through Mentimeter, which means that you will be able to interact with our presentation as well. And I will just need to figure out now how I can best do this. In the meantime, I will just introduce my co-presenters. So we have Charlotte Fiering, my colleague, who's joining us from Copenhagen. We have Jamil Hadi from Salford University, who's joining us from somewhere in that area, Greater Manchester. We have Danny Henderson from Care Visions, who's joining us from somewhere in Scotland, probably near Lockerbie.
Yep.
And we have, where is he? Vasilis Tiliakos, who is joining us from beautiful Greece. So welcome to all of that, to those guys in particular, and thanks for your support on this. In terms of the structure for this webinar, whilst I'm trying to figure out how to get the next slide up, we have decided to go for a very simple structure and basically to allow as much space and opportunity for dialogue with you as we possibly can. So the idea is that we start off with Charlotte giving a bit of an outline of the common third for those of you who may not be too familiar with the concept and how it is used. And then we'll go into dialogue to explore how has lockdown experiences shaped how the common third has been applied in practice. So we'll be talking to Jamil and Vasilis and Danny first, and then we will obviously make it possible for you guys to share your experiences or your thoughts on how the common third is being applied at the moment, or how it might be possible to apply it, if that makes sense. So I'll try very hard to navigate this. For some reason, Mentimeter does not seem to be my friend this morning. Or my computer does not seem to be my friend. I'll work this out in a second so that we can hopefully see all of this. But I will just hand over to Charlotte at this point.
Yes. I think I'm unmuted now. I hope.
Yeah.
Yes. So just a little quick introduction of how we use the common third in Denmark, because I think there's a lot of discussions around the common third, and no one really wants to take credit for the concept. So so I think in the UK it's much more used consciously than we actually use it in Denmark at the moment. But in Denmark, it refers to sort of a form of interaction with the pedagogical aim of facilitating personal development by refocusing attention on an activity, a project, a game, or a new experience, and thus creating opportunities for the child or adolescents to get a chance to explore sort of their own potential and resources, and especially their social skills. And in that aspect, you can say that in general, human interaction can be described as being interpersonal. So that's when two people are relating to each other, like you and me having an argument, or it could be intrapersonal, where two or more people are relating to how the individual person are feeling about themselves, like giving comfort to someone or giving praise. And sort of the third form of human interaction could be said to be sort of extra-personal. So that's when you and me are talking about how to carry out a task or an activity, or so we thus relate to something outside ourselves and the other. So it's not about you, it's not about me, it's about what we basically do together. So, so doing this common third actually have some kind of preconditions, and it's so, and all research, when we ask the children or the young people in Denmark, they really ask about adults or professionals who have a genuine, vivid and human engagement, presence and interest in what they're doing, how they work with the young people. So you could sort of say that a precondition is that all participants are generally motivated. It's a precondition that everybody will take part. You and me, if it's just you and me, could be a group activity as well, but everybody needs to take part. It has to be sort of a joint ownership. In an ideal world, you could say it would be fantastic if both of us had no prior knowledge. We would then explore things together. But since it's very often an adult and a child or a young person, the adult would always have sort of the advantage of being more experienced in a lot of ways. And so it is about experiencing challenges together or create experiences together. And the most important thing is actually, so when we harvest sort of the fruit of our work, we will then have sort of a shared or a mutual joy, so like a celebration or something to talk about, so that we actually are both pleased with what we kind of achieved here. So yeah, so there's of course methods that can be hanged up to this, but I think in a nutshell, this is basically sort of the three most important things to characterize a common third.
Thanks very much, Charlotte. That is really helpful. It is really interesting in terms of how the common third has traveled, because I think whilst you were saying that it is commonly used in Denmark, that as a social pedagogue in training, that was the first experience I had of the common third as well, was when I went to Denmark as part of my studies. And I think there's something about how this particular concept has then traveled over to the UK. So in the UK, we've used it a lot, and people have just really taken to it because it's given them an opportunity to frame what they were already doing in terms of engaging with children, young people, particular, because that's what most of our course participants, are working with. But also I think to better inform their own understanding and the way they conceptualize and use activities and shared interests as something that is extra personal and can inform that relationship and that shared learning journey. So it's a concept that's been traveling the world. And Vasilius, if I can invite you first to kind of share your experience of the common third, because you Yeah, you use it quite a lot, I understand. And I'm curious to see how that kind of understanding or application of the common thread has kind of changed a bit during the lockdown, and to what extent that's been guiding your practice.
Yes, hello everyone. I think Common Thread traveled to Greece from UK, so it was inside my luggages when I returned from UK to Greece. We tested it for the first time in the refugee crisis with refugees, and that's when it was transformed. So instead of working with children or with adolescents, we tested it with all age groups, and not in dyadic relationships, but with groups. And the facilitator was part of the group. So the main idea for us was to create a mutual relationship, collective memories that would lead to a collaborative creation of power. And then this would have led to a negotiation of identities. So the role of the facilitator in the common thread, for our understanding as Stigma, is to create a safe space for all these conditions to happen. I think this demanded a physical contact, which was not possible in a lockdown. This was our main fear and our main obstacle. What we realized, though, with the lockdown is that the safe space doesn't have physical boundaries. It can happen anywhere. It can be virtual as well. I have two examples of common threads that we used. We tested during the lockdown in Greece, and I think both of them are quite unique. If we have time, I can mention them.
Yeah, please go
ahead. Is that okay with you?
Yeah.
Okay. The first one was something that was not planned, and usually in common threads, it's not planned what you are doing. I was being assigned a task in a big company with 90 employees to discuss about their feelings during lockdown and how do they cope with childcare and with all the new challenges. So in order to do that, to proceed into individual sessions, I had to make a group presentation. So we were meeting with 5 to 10 people on a daily basis just to introduce the scheme. While I was doing that, 5 of the participants of the group that didn't know each other, they were from different departments of the company, sent a request to have this group meeting again. Outside the theme of the lockdown. So we started meeting each other. We created a safe space together to see what we can do. The common thread was the actual lockdown, and this explored lots of opportunities, starting with the identities of who am I and how my identity was transformed with the new challenges. Eventually, this got people who were very empowered and decided to plan the future of their return back to work because they weren't happy of how the company was treating employees. So they found the courage to demand an employee satisfaction survey, to speak to their managers and demand not to be sent emails after out of office hours. What else? They have started coffee breaks at work and reflection sessions at the end of every shift. And I think this is continuing. So they found the space to do it. The other example is that a common thread project that we had last year, and how this was developed, the second phase of the project was developed during lockdown. The initial project was called Nature's Common Third, and it was about physical contact and how they unaccompanied refugee children and students from the university could interact creatively together and imitate a social enterprise. So that's what they did. And while they were simulating a social enterprise, they were passing their knowledge, the knowledge created from the interaction, to children of nursery schools. They decided, as the next phase of the project, that they could deliver similar practices into younger children in general. So instead of imitating the social enterprise, they would just focus on how they would build entrepreneurial skills into children of younger age. At the lockdown and with the restriction of the physical contact, in the virtual safe space that we had, they decided that the Common Third needed to change directions. So they thought how they could work, how they could build on solidarity to families with children that were locked in their houses. They are still in discussion at the moment, but it's growing. They're trying to find participants. And the main idea is to give all the tools to families, interact with them in order to create their own antiseptic and their own sanitizers, and make them distribute them free to the community and to those people in need. So this is the general idea. But what my focus is that the safe space can happen anywhere. It doesn't have to be physical. You can do it virtually. You can do it while social distancing. You can do whatever you can. It is strange. It's a little bit difficult to decipher the messages from one to the other. But if you emphasize on the reflective process and on reflecting at the end of every session on what has happened and what can we do, how we can move this forward, I think everything is possible.
Yeah, thanks. That's great to hear, and I think you're completely right that it is strange because there's no denying the fact that we are interacting in ways that we're not really used to. At the same time, I think there is a real learning opportunity for us as well, and that we often expect those kinds of adaptive skills from the people we support in social care, who are used to one certain way of interacting with others in their families, and then might end up in a children's home where the way of interacting with others is completely different, or might take on a job where there's a completely different level of expectations and interactions within a business environment and so forth. So I think there's rich learning opportunity for us as professionals as well.
Yeah, and I think that the virtual space can easily distribute the power more collectively, because you lack the uniform of the job. You show them part of your environment. You face the same difficulties in terms of social distancing and all the virtual issues. It brings people together easier.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've talked to many people who've kind of found that it's enabled us to go beyond the kind of, normally in the UK you'd always say, "Hey, how are you?" but you wouldn't necessarily get a sincere response. And during lockdown,
exactly,
you were able to kind of communicate at that deeper level because there was real concern about people's well-being. So I think there were opportunities to, just go beyond the normal formalities in that respect, and really engage as genuine human beings, which is just so important. So that's really great to hear. I think particularly that bit about creating a safe space in which people can form relationships or develop their relationships, whether that's as employees of an organization or in any other context, and where they feel safe to do so, and where they feel they're able to take ownership. So the lockdown has, as you said, been kind of a common thread that's been thrust upon us because we're all in this. We're dealing with it in different ways, but there's no getting out of it. We all have to adjust and adapt. And yeah, sometimes we can choose what our common thread will be, and sometimes we need to choose within the limitations that we have. And I think what you're showing is that even then it is possible to be creative and to find ways to bring people together. So that's brilliant. I'm sure we'll come back to that. Jamil, I'm very curious about your reflections on the common thread and how lockdown has kind of enabled or changed the way that it can be used in practice. You're still on mute. Jamil, you are still on mute. I will just unmute you. So
delighted to be here. One of my favourite topics is the common thread, and I think that's because when Gabriel said that people use the common thread to frame what they've been doing, prior to being an academic, I was trying to promote young people's agency through using creative activities. So in a way, that experience of working with young people in that way brought me to social pedagogy, right? That kind of took me on a journey where I found social pedagogy. And I think the important thing about the common thread is it's a set of values, right? So it's applicable in lots of different settings, and it's helpful to think about it as a set of values. It's common, it's shared, it's a mutual space, but it's not just a mutual physical space, it's a mental, it's a psychological, and it's an emotional space. Michael Husen from Denmark talks about it as a relief from personal relationships, and I've been trying to use the common thread deliberately in trying to promote student engagement with communities and learning as a kind of mutual process that's situated socially. So it's situated outside of a classroom, because definitely the common thread is a way of people developing themselves as a social process, as part of their relationships and their interactions. And I've done a few things, but I've been working with a project called Loaves and Fishes, which is a community project for homeless people, and trying to connect students and get students to collaborate with people who use the service to produce new activities and new ideas. And we haven't had any, although we've had a set of values around it and a set of principles around it, we've allowed the activity to be kind of co-created between the students and the people who use the service. And I think the first thing students experience when they go to a homeless centre, because we probably all have a image in our head of who ends up in a homeless day centre, but when you're there, you suddenly realise that these are people with enormous resources, potential, previous histories that are fascinating and inspiring, and you suddenly are able in a common thread to disrupt people's identities, because not only are we going in on an equal basis, but we're experiencing people holistically. So what we've found is that we started off with a project around trying to identify an activity that could take place in the centre that would be co-produced and co-constructed between students and the service users. And the first activity we ended up doing was a storytelling group where everyone came and was in a circle and constructed a story. And this led to the idea of people telling their stories, but not telling their story as to why they necessarily visited Loaves and Fishes, but telling their story about their life and sharing what was important to them. So we're currently focused, because I think in the Common Third, it's good to have a target or something you're trying to achieve, because it unites the group around physical external activity. We're trying to produce a graphic novel telling people stories, but within the graphic novel, we've got different trends. So we've got we've got stories, we've got music and song lyrics, we've got poems, and this started before lockdown. And the interesting thing for me is that we picked it up a few weeks ago and said, let's try and meet virtually. And if you can think about the problems people have meeting virtually, and we met and we did a lot of interactive exercises, which were really about getting to know each other. How were we? What did we see when we looked out of our window? Physically, what were our sensations? Emotionally, what were our sensations? And over time, we kind of built trust. And the interesting thing about meeting virtually is, if you think about it in these conditions, it shrinks the space, because suddenly the social distance has disappeared and we're all in a room. And we're lucky, we've got facility whereby we can go into chat rooms, we've got a message board, we've got a whiteboard. So even people who maybe haven't got the wherewithal or haven't got the means to speak on using a microphone, they're still able to participate. And I think yesterday we actually, through this process, and I think what's happened is that we built trust. We trust the people we're working with, the staff at Loaves and Fishes, and also the people who use that centre, who we call the residents of the local area. And it led to us yesterday having a socially distanced walk. If you think about a socially distanced walk, you've got to be able to trust people. And we use the walk in order to try and build our bonds with each other, but also to get people to talk about how one of the ideas was about doing something environmental and the importance of parks in this climate. Public spaces have become increasingly important, and the idea was to develop an app and a virtual walk that we could produce for people to share online. So that's, and I suppose I'm just going to finish with this. I suppose one of the significant things for me, and Helen is actually here, I know, from the project, who's a project worker there, so I'm hoping she'll speak or she'll contribute maybe to the chat. But one of the interesting things I think is that the activity inevitably, as people grow, leads to something else. And I think our partnership with Loaves and Fishes has been going for 2 years, with different sets of students, different sets of people who use the service. And the possibilities, the way it's kind of become dynamic and it's evolved, like Vasilios described in Greece, his original idea becoming something else, is really kind of quite powerful. And like I say, I think the virtual environment, in a funny kind of way, it shrinks the space for us and it opens up different sorts of possibilities for people joining in who might be a bit nervous to turn up in a community space, but will feel, yes, I can give that a go. I can feel the safety of engaging digitally. So I think it opens up a whole different set of possibilities, still on the same basis of those kind of shared values.
Thanks. That's really fascinating, and I think, yeah, you're completely on point. One of the things I love about the Common Third is that when we create space for people to feel safe and to engage with each other without kind of that fear of being judged, then we just amplify the creativity and the imagination and the opportunities where this might lead next. So it's not just following our idea of what this common third could be, but everybody has something contribute and great things happen. So that is fantastic to hear. Danny, you've been involved with the Why Not Trust in particular, supporting care experienced young people and care experienced adults as part of your work at Care Visions. I wonder if you want to share a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, there's been quite a, working in residential and working with care experienced community has been quite a kind of different, quite divergent experiences in terms of the experience of the lockdown and the lockdown measures and sort of the global issues that have manifest, you know, through the pandemic. Can I speak to the residential experience, Gabriel? That was, you know, and I'll certainly cover some aspects of the Why Not care experience community as well. But, you know, I suppose in relation to the common third, what was apparent to be sort of reflects your original comments about, you know, finding a way of understanding what's happening, you know, within our engagements and interactions. And my sort of going back to the common third, I had a very naive perspective, I suppose, on what the common third might represent, in the sense that, you know, I kind of seen it as episodic or incidental in terms of activities that took place between carers and young people. But in sort of reviewing our experiences of the pandemic in relation to our young people, what was apparent that you know that we were preparing for catastrophe in terms of the, you know, what we were going to face, you know, because of the pandemic, and in terms of, you know, staff absences and sickness, and, you know, an increase in incidents and non-compliance from young people around the control measures, none of which manifest, and quite the opposite did, you know, or kind of, there's been a dramatic reduction in sort of in incidents and difficulties, distressed episodes and missing episodes, and an increase in the attendance of our support staff. And that led me to kind of consider, you know, how can you conceptualise this? How do we understand what's happening? And sort of led to a broader understanding, I suppose, of the applicability of the common third, you know, and the commonalities that sort of were brought about by the control measures, you know, of the pandemic, in terms of confronting the universal sort of issues around anxiety and fear, you know, no least because of the sort of, you know, the global coverage of the pandemic and what had happened in other countries, but also, you know, in terms of, you know, losses that we were anticipating and losses that you know, that people had incurred in terms of sort of, you know, control and agency over their own lives, and that being a common experience across the whole community, rather than just something that was focused on children and young people, you know, be they care experienced young people living in the community or care experienced young people living within residential services. So it kind of challenged the structural, you know, the structural issues in terms of how power's dispensed and how power's held within services, because, you know, we were limited in terms of reach, in terms of decision making, and you know, that was very much devolved to individual relationships and to you know, back to the residential services in a way that's entirely unique to this set of circumstances, and some of the kind of systemic assumptions we make about what our role is, and, you know, in these relationships with our young people. So, you know, we had to negotiate the changed reality together, and that involved power sharing in a way that we'd never kind of experienced before. You know, we had shared limits in terms of what we could do and what we couldn't do, and, you know, for our children, that was often about kind of not going on sort of, you know, extravagant, if you like, trips or outings or engaging in activities, but actually creating spaces within our houses to you know, to find ways of engaging creatively and you know, being spontaneous in that respect, rather than sort of, you know, planning too much. There was stuff around, you know, the kind of lockdown challenge in the perspective, challenging the perspective that the lockdown is somehow a hiatus in terms of development, that we've just pressed pause on the economy or any kind of meaningful activity, when actually the opportunities for development were abundant, when we started to look into what was happening, assumptions about education and how that's delivered, and caring, the process of caring not being a sort of, a kind of one-dimensional thing, whereby caring within our community, our care experience community and our residential services become much more reciprocal, much more mutual, rather than adults just giving care. Everybody was involved in caring for each other. So, and this had, in terms of trying to understand, why we were experiencing the changes that we had, it's kind of some relevance here in relation to sort of containment theory, and that what Vassias was talking about in terms of creating safety, by focusing on task, by being immersive in activities, and being intensely focused, sharing that sense of solidarity, and actually sort of displacing some of the sort of emotional angst onto a task, and actually processing that emotional angst that was created by some of the discourse around the pandemic, displacing that and filtering it through the task. It kind of helped to build a sense of solidarity and a way of sort of ameliorating some of the negative aspects of what people were experiencing, and it fundamentally kind of speaks to some questions about what we prioritise, what we foreground in our work, and particularly in Scotland, and I think probably UK-wide, there is a preoccupation with outcome-focused or remedial intervention for children and young people, and how that kind of might actually corrupt the relational process, and what we can learn from this, that business of being present has been very sort of, an idea presence has just become much more powerful in reviewing those experiences through the perspective of the common third.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think your point about outcomes is really, really a good one, because usually the outcomes are defined by adults for children, and perhaps there's been more of an opportunity to kind of, set goals during the lockdown with children, young people. I know some children's homes were talking about, having a joint routine of, fitness activities, going for a bike ride, or, walking down the lockdown, those kinds of things. But they were tasks that the young people had wanted to achieve, rather than outcomes that had been determined by the caring adults with the very best intentions, potentially. But nevertheless, there's something about the ownership, again, that young people are able to take in that process. So it doesn't feel done to, but done with.
And it has brought into focus the developmental opportunities that are abundant within those kind of shared experiences, and speaks to some of the outcomes that we're so keen to kind of to reach with and for young people in terms of resilience, the kind of development of relationships, the development of self-efficacy and competence in a common environment where they're not being otherized or stigmatized by this idea that they've somehow, we've got to somehow address inadequacies, because the challenges are common. So that element of commonality is incredibly important, something that we would want to preserve and perpetuate beyond the pandemic. Yeah,
absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. I think that's really encouraging in so many ways to see that. Even situations that are as serious and as horrific for many people as the pandemic can give us a new perspective on things, and perhaps enable us to really appreciate the priorities and how we can reach things. And how I think one key thing for me there was that notion of reciprocity, which is just so important to the common third, and what you were saying about adults not just giving care, but genuinely caring about each other within the children's home is, I think, is a very encouraging sign. I would like to just explore something with you and with you all, and that is really to find out, we've got about 15 to 20 minutes left, and I'm curious to find out, what would you like to explore a bit further, all of you? We have given a few options here, and if you take your phones out and go to menti.com and use the code at the top, which is 440576, you should be able to vote on this while we speak. I have also just spotted that there is a question or comment. Oh, this is the story crafting link again. Fantastic. Thanks for sharing that. So we're curious that there are, I think, several inflections with regards to the common third, as we've seen, and as Jamil and Vasilius and Danny have mentioned, there's the bit about how do you do a common third while social distancing, for instance, through a social distanced walk or virtual things. There's that bit about virtual common third opportunities. And of course, the fact that COVID-19 has provided us with a rather unexpected common third itself. Now, we may not get enough time to explore all of these, but at this point, I can also let you know that there is a virtual coffee Zoom room. So it is a virtual common third opportunity in that sense that we have created throughout the conference. And I'm sure that Kara will be sharing details about that in a moment, so that after the session, if you wanted to explore any of these aspects further, we can hopefully do that in the coffee room, in the coffee Zoom room. So it looks like virtual common third opportunities is a crucial theme for people. And I'm curious at this stage to find out if any of you have any examples perhaps that you would like to share about what you have done in the virtual environment, virtually, to create common thirds, to offer those opportunities within your professional practice. So this is an opportunity for anyone really to just unmute yourselves and give us a little bit more of an insight into what you may have done.
Hi all, hi Gabriel. Just because nobody is talking, I'll fill the gap. Just very briefly, others may have heard this because I keep talking about it, but I work for a Derbyshire County Council in the UK, supporting residential services. I don't actually work in residential myself, but I support around the service, and I'm actually involved in training. But in one of our homes, it's trying to build a whole creative aspect around how the children work and engage with staff, with the world, with community. And with lockdown, a lot of those opportunities disappeared. But one member of staff is really involved in photography, and the children in the home were also interested in photography. And they used the idea of taking photographs which represented isolation. They met with a whole range of, what actually happened is a number of the members of staff from the home actually moved in permanently with with one of the children for a period of time. And therefore a lot of staff were outside and not able to get to the home. So during that period, they had video conferencing conversations, but mediated often through the fact that they'd taken photographs, where they'd taken the photographs, how they'd done it in isolation, what it had meant, what they were representing. And all of that conversation was really holding the emotional space through the activity, which I think echoes things that we've all talked about in terms of that power of a common third. But they did that very naturally. It wasn't something that they particularly conspired. It grew out of what they were working on. But that's just one of our experiences, hopefully to hear from some others.
That sounds brilliant. Thanks for that example, Simon. That sounds absolutely fantastic in so many ways. And I think, yeah, photography has very much become a digital medium. So there's lots of opportunities to both do that in the real world for the want of a better expression, in the physical environment, but also to add a virtual component to that. That can become a common third. Perfect. Sounds excellent. Does anyone else have any examples you might want to share?
Hi, Gabriel. Yeah.
Hi.
Yeah. I've been working with some alumni social work students, and a bit connected to something Jamil was saying around the story. So we've been working around public narrative, and people having that opportunity to sort of revisit what identity means, working as a social worker during the pandemic, and that's been done digitally. So they've gone away and prepared those stories, and I'm actually going to be meeting them tonight again for them to use that digitally and to present to each other and try and kind of negotiate what this means and how this is challenging that identity. So I really like the idea of the stories being this kind of common third, but actually it's about trying to access emotion through stories, which is a really powerful way of doing something. It's not just the telling of the story, but it's actually then helps people connect with those values, all of which are being hugely challenged in this time for people at kind of very different levels, both personally and professionally. And it's been, so I really like the ideas around this kind of the space and the common third, and I hadn't kind of thought about that to the same degree. So I'm really interested to kind of reflect on that as well. I was looking very much at the activity before, but I think that there's more about that space. And some of the other work that I've been doing through Zoom is working with organisations, social care workers, again reflecting on that, on the time of the pandemic. And somebody described it to me the other day as being this almost this therapeutic space, as well as there being a purpose to the activity. And I think that's something I've been really conscious of in the work that I'm doing, that I'm being asked to do maybe specific training, but that you have to acknowledge this space at the moment and think how you kind of weave that into whatever you're doing, because it's a really powerful time. So it is kind of just emerging. And I'm really grateful for these discussions this morning, because it has made me think of it in very different ways.
Thanks, Ollie. That's great to hear. I think it's a really good point, and probably worth exploring further about what makes a space safe for people, but also how we might understand that to mean different things, because not everybody has the same understanding of what is a safe space for me. That would be very different potentially to what is a safe space for someone else. And as well, there is an aspect about what can we do to actually not just make it a safe space, but also a space where development and growth and adventure can happen, so that people feel safe enough to take a step out of their comfort zone and into their learning zone, if that makes sense. So we need to make sure that they feel they have that comfort zone within the space we create. And also that they feel encouraged and supported to take a step outside of what makes them feel safe, to take a step forward, to challenge themselves. I think that's been, I think, quite important during the pandemic as well, as, you know, what can we do to make sure that people don't just kind of want to hide in their bedroom and stay there forever until the world is fine again, but what can we do to kind of enable people to gradually, recognize that we need to make it as safe as possible or as comfortable as possible, but we can't completely make it safe. We can't just have a magic wand and that's it. Okay, Faith, sorry, did you want to say something? You just popped up on my Zoom screen. So I just wanted to give you the opportunity. You're on mute just now, so just unmute yourself first.
Hello.
Hey.
Yes, I just want to add to the conversation. The pandemic has come to stay. Coronavirus is here with us, and it has really changed the order of day amongst every one of us. I would like to start by saying that an aspect that is really worrisome is stigmatization. Those that have been COVID positive are being stigmatized in the part of where I'm coming from. And there is a sensitization, my department, in fact, I am thinking about. We have to do a drama, a play presentation, but I have some challenges. The challenge is the drama itself is a society of itself. And they said we need to do social distancing. How do we act out this play without mixing up with others? To bring out a character properly, you need to show us this person is this character in the play. I'm talking from the area of performance. I'm in the area of theater performance. And if you social distance in a play, the society of that play, how will you achieve that? Whereby you have to come together and that play. And we're talking about free space. How do we use such space to mingle with, to achieve what we have in mind? I have a play that I'm looking at the prospects. We shouldn't stigmatize, and also the benefits that came out of this period of the COVID-19. There was this stay-home order, lockdown, the families are all together, and a family that has been looking for the fruit of the womb for a very long time, it was an opportunity for this family to come together, and the wife conceived of the child within that period. And after that, what happens? The child was born, and the child was named Corona Ere. In where I'm coming from, it means Corona woman. And the parents gave the child as a society where you name a child or christen a child with the condition or the situation as of that moment. Okay? And at the end of the day, the child grew up in this society of the play I'm talking about now. Okay? The child grew up and being stigmatized. Nobody wants her around in school. She was chased out and all that. And she comes back to say, why did you name me Corona Ere? So the parents had to say, out of where there was pandemic, we were able to have you. You were born out of that pandemic. They've been looking for the fruit of the womb for this number of years. So that is the kind of creativity that is ongoing. But I have a challenge. How do I dramatize this on a stage where I will social distance, where I will not use the right space to do this performance? Please throw more light on that. Thank you so much.
Thanks for sharing that. I think it's a wonderful example again of the power of stories. And I think you make a really important point there about giving ourselves the opportunity to explore different roles and recognizing that we play a character in different social situations. And that sometimes it is about just kind of testing out how might that character respond right now, or how might others respond to that character. And yeah, creating the opportunity to kind of play that through is really important. But yeah, as you say, there are these challenges about how do you do that when you have to adhere to social distancing as well, and presumably you'll have limited stage space and all of that. So yeah. I'm sure you and your team will find a great solution for that.
All right.
Thanks for sharing that.
Thanks,
there is just one comment from Simon saying, have you thought of using puppetry to dramatize aspects of the narrative? So using like hand puppets or something like that. Yeah. Or are there opportunities to perhaps perform it outside where you're not necessarily limited by the physical size of the stage in quite the same way?
Okay.
Something like that.
That's okay. Thank you so much.
Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you.
Right, we are slowly coming up to the end of this webinar, but I would just like to ask you to help us capture what have been the key learning points from this first series of our webinars, because we want to kind of be able to look at different social pedagogical concepts, as I said, and to kind of try and extract some of the key messages, some of the key aspects that we're picking up that seem to make, in this case, the common third particularly important as a concept to guide our practice. So I'd like to invite you just now, again, using menti.com and the code 440576 on your mobile phone to just post any kind of key points from this webinar, any kind of short reflections you might have on what is there about the common third that seems to be important at this point in time. Thanks. So there are many really fascinating points that you guys are raising just now. I'm glad to see that you have taken something away from the conversation, and I'm excited to see what these points are. So please feel free to keep them coming. I'll leave this open for a little bit longer. And I think it's probably time to finish off just now, given that we've had an hour just now. As Kara mentioned in the chat room, there is a virtual Zoom coffee room where we can continue any of those conversations or share examples that we may not have had time for just now. So please feel free to basically just log out of this webinar. You can always rejoin later on when the next webinar starts. And that won't be until 12 o'clock or 12:30, I believe. So you'll have plenty of time to hang out in the coffee room in between if you want to. And I would just like to thank in particular my co-presenters, Charlotte and Vasilius and Jamil and Danny, for sharing their insights. And obviously also want to thank all of you for joining in and sharing your thoughts and ideas and practice examples. That's been really fascinating to see. And I hope you'll join us again soon for the next webinar of the conference. And I hope you'll also join us again for the next webinar of this webinar series exploring social pedagogical concepts during turbulent times. So thanks again. Feel free to stay here, or feel free to go to the coffee room, or feel free to sign off just now.